Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and quite a bit to go through today. We have an updated note on Tesla from Goldman Sachs. We'll go through that briefly. Quite a few tweets from Elon, specifically relating to full self-driving, as well as an ongoing, I don't know if I'd call it a feud with Bill Gates, but a little bit there. Then we have some news out of China, news on solar, and a couple other stories to go through as well. First thing today is Tesla stock finishing up 12.5% on the day to $419.62. That compared to the Nasdaq, also a pretty strong day, up 1.9%. But Tesla continues to rebound. The closing price today is actually now above the closing price on Friday 9/4, right before the S&P inclusion announcement that did not include Tesla happened. So Tesla has now completely erased the down 21% worst single-day performance ever last week on Tuesday, providing us with yet another example of why I personally hate stop-loss orders. Sticking with the stock here for just a second, Goldman did issue an updated note today. I believe they kept their price target the same, that is $295 post-split, but they did provide an update to a metric that they have been tracking that we've talked about in the past, that is global Tesla app downloads. They track this because they believe there might be some correlation with app downloads and deliveries, which I think intuitively makes some sense, though I don't think it was the best last quarter. Anyway, they write, quote, Tesla global weekly app downloads have recently been tracking up on a year-over-year basis, with the most recent full week of global data at up about 20% year over year, end quote. Personally, I don't put a whole lot of weight in this. This up 20%, that's just the last full week. They do also provide a rolling 3-month average. That actually looks relatively close to last year's Q3, though it's a little tough to tell because the charts that they have included don't actually have labels on the y-axis. Last year in Q3, Tesla delivered about 97,000 vehicles, so obviously people are expecting growth year over year. Q3 is expected to be Tesla's best quarter ever for deliveries. The last time I got an update from FactSet, which was September 2nd, the consensus then was 144,000 deliveries for the quarter. So we'll see. As usual, I'll do a more in-depth delivery forecast episode as we get closer to the end of Q3, and we should get the official report on either October 2nd or October 3rd. Next up today, we have quite a few tweets from Elon from over the weekend. He had a series of tweets discussing Tesla's upcoming Autopilot rewrite. Somebody asked how that rewrite was coming along, and Elon said, quote, releasing private beta in 2 to 4 weeks, public beta, early access owners who opt in, 4 to 6 weeks after that, then all US Tesla owners mid-December. Above schedule is contingent upon not encountering major unexpected setbacks, end quote. So looking at that timeline, 2 to 4 weeks from this tweet would be September 26th through October 10th, then 4 to 6 weeks after that, the first public release going out to early access, which is probably the first time that we'll start seeing some leaked videos of it, could happen October 24th at the earliest of that range, or at the latest, November 21st. Then of course, Elon says all US Tesla owners mid-December, so that would be about 1 or 2 months after the early access release. So unsurprisingly, this is probably a slight delay on the last timeline that we got for the core rewrite for Autopilot. Elon back in mid-August said that a limited public release was probably happening in 6 to 10 weeks. Assuming he also means early access in that tweet, that would have put the end of that range at October 23rd, and the earliest end of this range again for early access was October 24th. So maybe they could still hit that first range, but I definitely think more realistic to expect towards the back end of the range. We've talked about the core rewrite quite a few times now, so I assume most of us are familiar, but just in case not, what this rewrite is going to do is basically take the 8 camera frames that would exist now, stitch those all together to be a single frame, and then taking those new, larger single frames, distributing them over time to a video segment, and then using those video segments for labeling and for training. This is the alpha build that Elon has been using in his own vehicle for quite some time now, which has allowed him to go from work to home without intervention on occasion, which is how Tesla has started to define achieving feature complete full self-driving, which is obviously quite different from an autonomous robotaxi, but what should also be a pretty significant step change from where Autopilot and the full self-driving option are today. Definitely something to be excited about. I wouldn't be surprised to see the timeline pushed out a little bit again, but hopefully as we get closer and closer, those timeline estimates become more accurate, and if Tesla can manage to release this in Q4, that would mean a significant portion of deferred revenue from previous full self-driving option sales would be recognized in the quarter, and it means from that point forward, Tesla can recognize more of that revenue up front, improving margins, and also probably increasing the take rate on the option itself. All right, we'll come back to Elon's Twitter in a second, but first we need some background. The next story is on some comments that were made by Bill Gates on electric vehicle and other alternative fuel technology in a Gates note a few weeks back. The note was titled, quote, "How do we move around in a zero-carbon world?" End quote. The premise of the note is around climate change and the need to reduce carbon emissions from transportation. which of course aligns with Tesla's mission, but Gates cast doubt on the ability for electric vehicles to be utilized for more than short-haul type of transportation. He says, quote, EVs excel at short-haul travel. That means they're great options for personal cars and even medium-duty vehicles like city buses and garbage trucks. But even if we develop cheap, long-range EVs that are powered by zero-carbon sources, electrification isn't an option for many types of transportation. The problem is that batteries are big and heavy. The more weight you're trying to move, the more batteries you need to power the vehicle. But the more batteries you use, the more weight you add, and the more power you need. Even with big breakthroughs in battery technology, electric vehicles will probably never be a practical solution for things like 18-wheelers, cargo ships, and passenger jets. Electricity works when you need to cover short distances, but we need a different solution for heavy, long-haul vehicles. This is where cheap alternative fuels come in. There are several different kinds of these fuels, but the one you're probably most familiar with is biofuels, end quote. Obviously, Gates' comments here, whether intentionally or unintentionally, cast his doubt upon Tesla's ability to potentially achieve what they have stated they can achieve with the Tesla Semi. So hopping back to Twitter, Elon was asked about this, and he replied, quote, he has no clue, end quote. It's not the first time that we've seen friction between the two. Musk has obviously been a bit more vocal on this in the past. For example, back in February, when news had hit of Bill Gates purchasing a Taycan and also making some comments about range anxiety being an issue for electric vehicles, Elon replied to a tweet on the topic saying, quote, my conversations with Gates have been underwhelming, to be honest, end quote. While Gates seems to have been a little bit more subtle. For example, in this entire note on needing to shift over to electric vehicles and other fuels, he leaves Tesla absent from that note, but instead says, quote, you'll even be able to buy an all-electric pickup truck soon, thanks to legacy companies like GM and Ford, and new car makers like Rivian and Bollinger, end quote. Anyway, setting aside some of that drama, I think what this demonstrates, this overall note by Gates, is just how important it is to get the Tesla Semi to market as soon as possible, because until that proof of concept is out there, the doubt will remain, and that doubt will lead to further investments in other things that may not be as clean. Certainly, we'll continue to see investment in these long-range trucking type of projects from legacy automakers. The sooner the Semi is out, the sooner some of that stuff can start to wind down. And even potentially technology that is clean but perhaps less efficient than battery electric, such as hydrogen fuel cells. While we're on that topic, there's been a lot of reporting going on the last few days about Nikola Motors, a research agency that does have a short position on. The company came out with a note with some very detailed accusations of deception and being misleading towards investors on Nikola. I think Nikola did issue a rebuttal to some of those statements today, but from what I'm seeing on Twitter, not that strong of a rebuttal. And Bloomberg now is reporting today that according to sources, the SEC is investigating those allegations. I haven't talked about it much because I haven't had time to do the full amount of due diligence on the report and the rebuttal to the extent that would be needed to provide a well-informed comment. As I said after my interview with founder and chairman Trevor Milton, I personally had and continue to have no interest in investing in the company. I'm kind of happy to leave it at that, but if people do have more interest in this, please let me know in the comments. Those comments do guide decisions I make with the podcast and what I talk about. I also want to say, and I think this is a very broad comment that can apply to a lot of different guests, when I have guests on, I'm not necessarily going to go ahead and then sort of do a takedown of the things that they said on this podcast. I view my role in those circumstances as bringing the information to the surface and then letting others decide what to do with it. The reason for that is because I aspire to continue to have conversations like that, and if I were to have a guest on and then, sort of rip them apart in a future episode without giving them the proper opportunity for a rebuttal, that doesn't reflect very well on me. And if potential future guests see something like that, why would they come and talk to me then at that point? That doesn't mean that I'm not going to share my thoughts or that I'm not going to be honest about my opinion. It's just not going to be in that sort of targeted way that I know some of you would like to see. So hopefully that makes sense and adds a little bit of context around some of those conversations. But let's get back to Tesla. We have a report from Kelvin Yang on Twitter about a supplier for heat pumps in China, which has recently disclosed in one of their investor documents that they've recently won a contract from, quote, a well-known North American electric vehicle manufacturer in China, end quote, which I think we can safely assume would be Tesla. So in this document, they break out the model, the mass production start time, and the number of mass production units that they will need annually, listed in tens of thousands. So for client number 1 here, they list 2 models. The first model, the contract for that one was signed in May of 2019. The second was signed in May of 2020, but mass production on that second model will actually start sooner in August of 2020, while that first model will start in January of 2021. Then finally, they list the estimated annual volume in terms of 10,000 sets. The first has 20, the second has 45. So 200,000 for Model 1, which starts in January of 21, and then 450,000 for Model 2, which starts, very interestingly, last month, August of 2020. Obviously, we have to speculate a bit here, but it would seem that the Model 1 on their sheet here would actually be Tesla's Model 3, and then the Model 2 here would be Tesla's Model Y. This suggests a couple of things. First of all, obviously that August date implies that Tesla is starting to ramp up their supply right now. So again, Phase 2 and Shanghai-made Model Y seems to continue to be ahead of the perceived schedule. And then second thing, the 200,000 per year for the made-in-China Model 3, and then 450,000 per year for the made-in-China Model Y would seem to point to a production target of 650,000 per year from Model 3 and Model Y out of Shanghai. So, I don't know. All I really have to say about that is prepare yourself. Volume is going to go way up, and prices are probably going to come down. Remember what I said a month or two ago. Tesla right now could probably do a rear-wheel drive Model Y long range for less than 40,000 and still make a pretty decent margin on that vehicle. Remember, in the US, the SR Plus Model 3 starts at $38,000. Tesla has said that the cost to produce a Model Y is pretty comparable to the cost to produce a Model 3. If Tesla then adds 20 kilowatt hours of battery capacity to go from an SR Plus to a long-range pack, and then if Tesla's battery costs are around $100 per kilowatt hour, or potentially even lower, that extra capacity could be added for around $2,000 in cost, meaning Tesla could then hypothetically sell a single-motor, long-range Model Y for $39,990 and actually make the same exact amount of gross margin on that Model Y as they do with the SR Plus Model 3. Under those assumptions, the gross margin percent would be smaller, but the gross margin dollars would be the same. The percent is smaller because more revenue would be earned. So, after that analysis, then remember that this is for a Fremont-made Model 3 at a lower volume than what Tesla seems to be targeting here for Model Y in Shanghai. So naturally the costs are going to be lower producing the same amount of vehicles out of Shanghai than out of Fremont, California, but then also consider that the 450,000 unit volume is also higher than what Tesla is doing today on the Model 3 in Fremont. It's not too crazy to think that a year or two from now, Tesla could be selling in China a made-in-China Model Y with 300 miles plus of range for somewhere around the equivalent of $35,000 US. They may not need to do that. They may be able to capture a little bit more margin with a little bit higher price, but that's the flexibility that Tesla should have, and that is why Tesla has the confidence that they do, that these volumes that seem so crazy today are going to be sold. So I would say the growth story is just getting started. Speaking of businesses that are just getting started, we have a new report today from Electrek that Tesla has now officially partnered with some companies to start installing solar roof tiles. Electrek is reporting that Good Faith Energy has been certified and SunPro is under the process of becoming certified for the Tesla solar roof. Personally glad to see this. Hopefully this indicates that the solar roof manufacturing process is ramping up quickly. Remember in Q2, Tesla said they installed 3 times more in Q2 than they did in Q1, though obviously starting from a low base. But another part about this report that I found kind of interesting was something that the CEO of Good Faith Energy had to say. He said, quote, "Good Faith Energy is among a few elite companies nationally that's capable of installing a Tesla roof autonomously," end quote. I don't know a ton about roofing installation, so I'm not sure how much autonomy is currently involved in the process, but that does sound encouraging to me, and I have reached out to Good Faith Energy on Twitter to see if they'd come on the podcast to give us a bit more information on that process. Obviously, installation is a big part of being able to scale solar quickly. Elon Musk recently shared with Clean Technica a breakdown of the cost of solar, saying, quote, "Solar panel cost is only about 50 cents per watt. Mounting hardware, inverter, and wiring is about 25 cents per watt. Installation is about 50 cents per watt, depending on system size," end quote. Now, this related to rooftop solar. Clean Technica was asking how Tesla is able to afford such low costs on their solar, and Elon said, quote, "The other solar companies spend heavily on salespeople, advertising, and complex financing instruments. We do not," end quote, which is a huge change for Tesla versus the Solar City business model, which was heavily reliant on salespeople. That's a big reason Tesla's solar installations have fallen, but hopefully now that they have these low prices and are starting to seem to push that business again, hopefully we see those volumes start to pick up again. But anyway, the original point here was that installation is a big, significant cost for solar. So any innovation there can be extremely helpful, can lower costs, and can expand the market. In Musk's example there, it would be about 40% of the total cost of the system. All right, last couple things here for today. It looks like Tesla has finally concluded sending out their invitations for Battery Day, which is now just 8 days away, and I do have some good news here. I did get an invite from Tesla, so I will be attending Battery Day in person, and I will do my absolute best to make sure that that coverage is as good as it possibly can be for all of you. And as if we needed any more reasons to be excited about Battery Day, on Twitter, from the thread originating with Elon's tweet saying many exciting things will be unveiled at Battery Day, somebody on Twitter replied if there was any Plaid news, and Elon didn't reply to that, but if you go to his liked tweets on his Twitter account, you can see that he did actually like that tweet. So maybe a bit of a hint there from Elon that we might see a Plaid powertrain update from Battery Day. Last thing I'll say here is I'm unsure of what the exact schedule will be next week for the podcast, since obviously I will be doing some of that traveling, but I'll be providing updates as best I can on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, so make sure you're following me there. Make sure you're signed up here for notifications and subscribed, and thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, September 15th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.